It's time for the Double Stop with Brian Sword.
Welcome to the Double Stop. I'm Brian Sword. I sound a little rough today because I got a bit of a cold, but I'm going to soldier on here. This week, I have an interview with Mark Slaughter. About a month ago, I heard some samples off his new solo album, and I was really impressed. I thought they were really cool. So, I reached out for an interview. I think the biggest thing that surprised me was that he played all the instruments himself, except for drums. I guess I just never knew he was such an accomplished player. It also made me realize that he's one of those guys that's been around for a while, but I really know nothing about. Now, a funny thing happened in the middle of the interview. Mark's dog got free, so he had to chase him down in his neighbor's yard. Well, his neighbor is like 2 acres away. I tried to edit out as much as I could, but you can still hear him kind of snapping his fingers and doing other things to try to get his dog's attention. It also caused us to take a leap ahead in the timeline. So this interview basically covers his childhood, his early bands, Vinnie Vincent Invasion, beginnings of Slaughter, right up to the end of the Wildlife album. Then we kind of jump forward to the new CD. So this week is a good chunk of the story of Mark Slaughter. Perhaps in the future I'll have him back on, he can fill in the rest of the blanks.
And one day we're all gonna fade away. As the blinking claims the names in the flames of the ones who came.
Grew up in Las Vegas and musical family. My grandmother played piano, and my aunt was actually I believe a professor over at BYU years and years and years and years ago. But she was head of, she's really into music. So that's just part of the musical side of my mom's side.
And did that influence you at all to start picking up an instrument?
Probably with my grandmother, because when I was, very, very young, we're talking, baby to, year or so, I stayed with her a lot and she played piano. So I think that when you're around it, it's kind of like a lot of things. If you're around it, it becomes a part of your world,
And you play a bunch of different instruments. What was the order of which you picked them up?
Sang first, guitar. Then I played keyboards a little bit, and then learned bass because it's the top 4 strings of the guitar. And then when I started doing the Vinnie Vincent Invasion, I put it all down and just became a singer. So go figure. But that's kind of the order of events.
When you were growing up, in terms of early bands, and when did all that start for you?
Started when I was about 12 years old. I was playing in bands and plugging in and making noise, and ended up doing like the Jerry Lewis marathon out in Las Vegas, at the Muscular Dystrophy Association. And I did a lot of, just went out there and just did whatever I could making music. I mean, I did that all through high school. I had a band called Xcursion. And in that band, we released a couple albums, which, probably there's about maybe 4,000 of those or 5,000 of those out there. And it was good times. I was learning my craft, and I really enjoyed making music, like I said, from a very early age. So, I started getting heavy in guitar more so than voice. And then the next thing you know, like I said, I end up being a singer, which is completely the opposite of what my mindset is of, where I started. But I really enjoyed playing guitar. And then obviously it was Mike Varney who was the first one who said, well, but you sing. And I was like, uh-huh. So he actually sent me out on several. Mike Varney from Shrapnel Records sent me out to work with Icon, was one of the groups, and just barely, weeks prior, was trying to get me to work with Rudy Sarzo and Tommy Aldrich when they were doing and Tony McAlpine when they were doing a band called Driver that they were putting together. And Mike was like, you'd be the perfect guy for this. You'd be the perfect guy for this. And he was really pushing it. And, that was kind of like the deciding factor between the label and Vinnie to use me as the lead singer is because I had other people that were, ready to do something with me.
Now, in terms of how did Mike learn about you? Did you send in the tape for his column, or how did he find you?
I think we sent one of our albums out to him, and he was like, yeah, this is really cool. He goes, you got a great voice. And I was like, well, thanks. And he's like, you need to sing. And I go, well, I really like playing guitar. It's kind of like I always thought of myself like a Sammy Hagar type guy,
Right, yeah.
I just love to play guitar, but love to sing. So I like to do both. It's like not just one. And he is always like, yeah, put the guitar down. You'll just be a singer. And it's so funny that, quite honestly, he was very on top of what was going to happen in my career. I mean, he knew, and had a preconceived notion of what I would do and pretty much ended up doing. So, he was pretty smart that way.
At that point, his eye was pretty clearly on shred. So if you weren't a shredder, you should be a singer?
Well, maybe that was it. Or maybe he just thought that I had a certain tonality to my voice,
right,
that I should be doing this. I mean, like I said, when I was younger, in my junior high school, right entering into high school, I played in a jazz band, played guitar in the jazz band. Probably one of the most influential things that ever happened was the trumpet player for again, I lived in Las Vegas, so it was like all the jazz cats are out there, and the trumpet player for Glenn Miller's band, an older guy at that time, he came in, he said, and he sat down with each person in their charts, and he said to me, he sat down with me while I was doing my chart, and he goes, even if you make a mistake, if you meant to make a mistake, it was right. Because that's the rules of jazz and always flowing in the music. And there really is. So it was more of the thing of just of commitment as you play things. And it really influenced me through my life as far as a player, because I have no fear. It's kind of like the jumping off the giant building with a bungee cord attached. I know that, I know I'll land okay, but it's just definitely one of those things that you just always take that leap of faith whatever you do. And I think in that has really helped me vocally as well as guitar wise. And, that I'll always be very thankful for in Las Vegas of having that.
That also sounds a lot like the golden rule of, you got to know all the rules before you can break them. Do you think that played into it?
No, I think as far as the rules and that side of it, I think it's just one of those things that there's so many things that people are kind of scared of, or you're timid and you're not ready to commit on something or jump on it. And it was just one of the things of when you're as a player that you just aggressively go for it. Aggressively, again, if you hit a wrong note and use it as a passing tone, it's right. In other words, you just immediately shift. You immediately shift. In jazz, there's like a be-doo-da-doo-da, and then if they be-dee-doo-dee-doo-doo-dee-doo-doo, they might do something that's a little bit different. But as long as you meant to do that, as opposed to staying with just the typical thing,
right?
It's right.
Or react really fast.
I react really fast and use it as part of what you meant to do. Again, that was the interesting thing of what he said. But, I carried that with me into being a guitar teacher. And, after I graduated from high school, I became a guitar teacher and I taught, bass and a couple vocal lessons as well. And I had like 279 students a month, or lessons that I taught a month. So, I was swamped. That's all I did. And, in the meantime, I was still getting calls from Mike Varney, and then Dana Strum was still reaching out to me, saying, hey, I got this project, or, I still think you'd be perfect for Vinnie. And, next thing I put my guitar in this stand, and a month later I was filming the video for Boys Are Gonna Rock. And, a couple weeks after that, we were literally on tour with Alice Cooper. Here I am completely, in makeup, with high, big giant heel boots on, which put me at 6'4". It was crazy. And and again, Alice Cooper, one of my favorite things growing up was Alice Cooper, and obviously Sabbath and Led Zeppelin and AC/DC and all that stuff, and he was certainly one of the heroes in that. So it was really cool to be out and do that out of the frying pan and into the fire, so to speak.
I just have one more question about Xcursion. I was curious to what kind of style of music it was, because the logo looks very metal, and then one album cover looks pretty metal.
You're right.
And then the other one doesn't.
And then the other one is, the other one doesn't. I think that we were kind of metal dash. I wouldn't say, we always went towards a very melodic style. Even the metal stuff, even though it was like, I don't know how you'd even describe it. One was kind of like a more what was happening in the metal community, and the other one was probably us being more songwriters and just keeping it straight of being a rock band as opposed to trying to fit into a metal side of it. And there's only, there's very few of the White record out there. I think there's a total maybe 500 of those out there.
And would that be vinyl?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's been other people that have actually taken it and, copied it and are selling it on eBay and everything else. But as far as the actual physical product, that was it.
Now, when Dana came to you, he was a talent scout, right, at that point?
No, Dana had put Randy Rhoads in Ozzy Osbourne's band, and he had also put Jake in Ozzy's band. He certainly had a way of knowing, what would work for people. And as far as for me, he basically, he had his thing that he was doing with Vinnie.
Right.
And he just knew that I could fit on that. And the next thing I ended up doing it. It was pretty crazy. Like I said, it was 1 minute I'm a guitar teacher, the next minute I'm a lead singer in a rock band,
And for that record, so you're doing a video, you're brought in after the record's done, and you're doing a video and doing a tour. That must have been a bit of an odd situation for you.
Yeah, it was very different because it wasn't, again, you don't think that this is how it's going to happen. And then lo and behold, there you have it. You're up and doing it. And again, my safety blanket, which is the guitar, is gone, and now I'm just a singer only. So, It was a great experience. I loved doing it. We ended up touring with Iron Maiden right after that, and like I said, it was pretty amazing. The fact that 1 minute I'm a guitar teacher in a 4x6 room, the next minute I'm a lead singer opening up for Alice Cooper and Iron Maiden to thousands of people.
I'm trying to wrap my head around how that would affect you. That's got to be so jarring.
Well, it was different because it's kind of like, even though, obviously I sang in my band and everything, but it was almost like all of a sudden I'm doing something that I didn't, in my mind's eye, see myself being solely that. But it was great. It was a great adventure, and it was a wonderful experience.
And when it came time to write the next record, how involved were you in the writing of it?
Of the all systems go.
Yeah.
Obviously we did it from the ground up. Vinny is as I've said before, is an incredible songwriter and an incredible talent. I think we all had our 5 cents that we threw in on the thing, but it was Vinny's record. It's what he did. Some of the arrangements and the things that were changed around in it were certainly, along the way of there's, no other records that he's done after that since we left. So obviously there's, there's a lot we did do.
And what led you and Dana to leave the band then?
Well, Vinny wasn't happy with the way things were going with, he wasn't real happy with the way things were going with Dana and I. And then he said to me at one point, where's your loyalty lie? How do you feel about this? And are you going to continue with me? And I just said that I'd rather be in the gutter with Dana than continue here. And so I basically, we had basically nothing going on there. There was a leaving member agreement that each member of the Vinnie Vincent Invasion had to sign due to the fact that Steve Stevens left Billy Idol's band, and the A&R director of Jeff Aldrich said, I don't want anybody leaving without a leaving member agreement, which means that you have to come up with 4 songs for the record label to review and to say whether or not yes or no if they're going to sign or pick up the option, which is the option is basically the record label of the artist in which you were signed under. So basically they let Vinny go and they picked up my option as basically under Vinny's deal, which it was his deal. So I ended up basically with his deal.
And did any of the songs that you wrote for that end up on the first record?
Absolutely, all of them.
Oh yeah,
Fly the Angels and Desperately, and there was a lot of songs on there that ended up being those songs. But it's pretty crazy, and for us because we ended up writing the songs and then recording it, and then we got the deal from the demo, and then from there we recorded the whole record up. Then we held it for 6 months because we didn't think that the record label had their marketing dollars and everything together yet. And then we released it in 1990.
And in terms of finding the other members of the band, how did you find those guys?
Kind of through, there was a amazing publicist named Deb Rosner who put out the feelers, and we got a lot of, tapes and, 5 moving boxes full of, of tapes and other stuff, videotapes of people lighting themselves on fire. I mean, all this crazy stuff. You wouldn't believe it. And then basically we ended up doing auditions for the drums. And Nick Menza was one of the drummers that
really?
we actually looked at. Yeah, who was an amazing drummer.
Oh, yeah.
But I think he fit better with Megadeth than he would have fit with us. But, it doesn't mean he was less than. It's just that I think that he fit that really well. Things always work out for a reason. Basically when we put the whole band together, we recorded it all. And the next thing you know, we are opening for Kiss. Mind you, the band never played a club, never played out. Not saying I didn't do that when I was younger, but the band Slaughter never did any of that. So we went right from the studio to opening for Kiss. And our first show, when we came off after playing for 11,000 people in Lubbock, Texas, was our CEO and the president of the record label with gold records in our dressing room. We didn't even know they were there. It was like mind-blowing,
I remember when that record came out, and it was huge out of the gate. Like, Up All Night was a big hit. At least, my perspective is from Canada, but in Canada, it was big right out of the gate.
Right. It did really well in Canada as well as in the States. That's really the 2 hot markets that, as I look around my wall of my studio, that, the records reflect,
And then Fly to the Angels, I think that was probably your second single, if I recall correctly. And that one took off huge as well. And
took off huge. Yeah.
There's quite a difference, I'd say, lyrically between Up All Night and Fly to the Angels. In terms of the inspiration for Fly to the Angels, where did that come from?
There was a girlfriend of mine that passed away from high school that I kind of went to reach out. I was like, I really need to get in touch with Cindy. And I just kept telling my friends, have you seen Cindy? I really need to get in touch with her. Lo and behold, I had a friend of mine call me up and say, dude, I don't know how to tell you this, but, Cindy passed away a couple days ago and her funeral's tomorrow. And I was just like blown away. So I wrote the song about letting go, probably my first run in of, somebody I cared about passed away like that, and I wrote the song about that. It's a song about letting go and that was, and again, it's just an honest thing. I mean, Up All Night is obviously the Las Vegas lifestyle, that I know and love. And that works as well. I mean, I think that the temperament of people are not just one-sided. And I think that's kind of how our music really is we try to make it to where there's not just one thing that we do a lot of things.
Your vocal styling back then, and still with Slaughter, it was very distinct, very high. Do you have any regrets over that 20 years later?
Well, what's funny is it is that the fact that I've been singing all these songs literally a half step higher my whole career than the record was recorded. Because we don't like the way that we tune down to D on the record, meaning that those guitars are tuned down a whole step. And then we decided to turn it up a half step because it felt better as we were playing. So I've been singing all those songs up a half step higher than the record, a lifetime. So I'm just kind of conditioned to do that at this point.
Yeah.
So I don't really say, oh, I wish we did this or did that. I mean, it's just the way it is,
I'm still kind of amazed at your record comes out. Yes, there's a history with Vinnie Vincent Invasion, and they were successful, but not to that level of how it came out and went gold really fast. I'm trying to wrap my head around how that happened for a new band like that.
It was one of those things we really didn't have a chance to really think about it because we were so busy doing. No different than when we were out on tour with Kiss, which is, the band that Vinny came from. And, Gene and Paul, I mean, these guys were, Gene was very, very kind to me from the very beginning. When we were it was about a month away from touring with Kiss, the seamstress on the video set, we were, doing the Fly the Angels video. And I said, I'd really like a bomber jacket, something that's really cool. And, I'm a pretty big guy. And she goes, I know who's got a bomber jacket. I'll see if we can borrow it from him. And it was Gene. So in that whole video I'm wearing Gene Simmons' bomber jacket.
Oh, it's such a statement, and it's an accidental one.
Yeah. And it's pretty crazy to think that, here, it was just a thing. Hey, yeah, sure, you can use it, but I want it back. Okay, no problem. So, I did the video, handed them the bomber jacket. And I'm sure it's in, Gene Simmons' list of Kiss stuff and memorabilia that he has at his own house. But it's kind of funny how that happened and how life goes,
I want to ask you about a particular show because I think it was a bit of an anomaly and it was a very weird night. It was on the tour with Kiss in Toronto because I saw the show, and it was you guys and Faster Pussycat and Kiss and Whitesnake on the same bill. And it was a very tension-filled night for Kiss because Whitesnake went on last. Right. And Kiss were very pissed in that show. I was just wondering if you remember that show and if there was anything happening backstage.
I do. Nothing in particular happening backstage except for because it was with Whitesnake and the way it went, Kiss wanted to have their typical thing of their show with the lights and the pyro and all the stuff. And then there's, David Coverdale, who wouldn't have, not necessarily David, I'd say the production under David Coverdale. So, let's look at how these things really run. He wasn't even a part of that.
Sure.
It's part of the people who run the show. And they said absolutely no pyro, absolutely no this and that. And Gene and Paul were very, very upset because, Kiss is about the show. They're about the, we're going to bring it to the people. The circus is in town and here it is,
Yeah.
So that's where I think a lot of the tension is just between that side of it, because it wanted to do more. But there wasn't any fist fights or anything on or yelling matches or anything like that. But that was part of it.
Well, it definitely added a dimension to the show, the tension that was in the air. It was an interesting night.
Well, and I think the Kiss totally kicked ass that night too. Without it,
did. Oh yeah.
I mean, the funny thing is you'd say, well, and then there's Kiss, and what? Well, they were completely stripped down. This is without makeup. This is without half their big stage show and everything else. And, they still brought it on. And that's certainly, that fighting attitude of what those guys have done and have been is, it's just priceless.
And it wasn't even dark yet when they played either. They didn't even have that.
No. It was a very bright and sunny day there in Toronto. I remember it well.
So you finish up that tour. And you jump in for the wildlife. Going back into the studio with that much success under your belt right away, was it daunting to do the next album, or was it business as usual and you jumped right into it?
We only had in fact, I went and did my fishing trip after the big show, after all those shows. We toured with Poison through 91 and mid 91. And then I went on a fishing trip up into the Charlotte Islands. That's when I said, I just got to get out of here. So my dad and I went on a fishing trip up there in Alaska. We had done the Campbell River when I was younger, but we went up there and did a fishing trip where there were no phones. There was no contact. So basically as soon as I got back to land, we had one more show that was on the list of shows, and which is in Columbia, Georgia. And then we did that, and then we started right on the record about a month later, because the record company said, okay, well, we got the momentum going. Let's get this moving. Let's get another record going. So we spent about 2-3 months doing that, and then released it right after.
And I remember you had Shannon Doherty in your first video.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
My manager, Bud Carr, was very tight with a lot of Hollywood in that type of stuff. And he basically knew the manager for Shannon, and they said, hey, you guys, why don't we use her? And I was like, okay, cool. And, we hung out, and she was cool. She was fine. And, the video went well, and it did okay. First we did the wildlife video, and then we did Real Love. And then at that point, the whole industry, as far as that goes, changed. It was a complete different animal, because it was the grunge thing was taking off, and we were going to get into our next video, which is Days Gone By, which we had shot already. And it was basically like, don't waste your time. So it was weird. It was very, 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 very strange. But, I think we were the last wave of what most people would call the hairband thing. But, just like all music, it goes through phases and decades and changes, and that's just part of how it goes.
It's interesting because a lot of bands, like Winger, it seemed like it changed between albums. So by the time they were putting out their third album, it had already changed. But it seems like for you, you got your record out in time, and it changed within a few months after the release, because it still did well in Canada.
Yeah, it did well in Canada, and it did well in the States. But, I think we sold like 83,000 records in our first week, back then, which, people wish albums sell like that again. So I mean, it did really well, but it was a different, it's just a different time. The industry itself was changing. The the guy who ran, I think his name was Kevin Sigerson or something like that. I can't remember his last name, Sigerson or whatever it was. He said that he'd never play bands like Motley Crue and Slaughter and Poison, named us along with everybody else, and that was it. That was going to be the end of it.
And then you ended up on CMC, which is, to me, very
Right.
much like Frontiers is now. How did you end up on that label? What was the transition like?
It was just the way that it's just the way that the industry was going. Again, CMC was, you're right, it was kind of like Frontiers. It was a hands-on, kind of an independent style thing. So Frontiers Records is from Italy, and it's just one guy. It's one guy doing it. I know he's very hands-on. He certainly has been, very strong in keeping this type of music alive. But I mean, he's the only guy who is really doing it with a lot of those bands. Escape Music, which I signed with out of Europe. They totally get it, and they're helping me with my new record, and I'm really pleased to be with them through Europe and most likely through Asia as well. But other than that, I'm just doing it through my own label at this point.
That's a big jump ahead, but I've heard the record, and it's a great record. But I was looking at it at the website and trying to figure out how you're releasing it, because it seemed like a soft launch.
It is, and the next step for me is I'll start selling the CDs through the website. There's a lot of the distribution companies and all this stuff. Everything is imploding in the actual industry as far as I see it, because if you go into a Best Buy, which we have down here in the States, there's no longer any video or there's no longer any CDs available, which used to be a huge racks and racks and racks. Now there's only 2 racks left of CDs. And all the computers, there's no more CD-ROMs inside the computer. So you don't even have that at this point. So it's kind of changing. The whole industry is changing to actually not even shipping any product. So, distribution companies, music labels, everything is changing dramatically at this point because of that.
Like, I've talked to a lot of producers, and a lot of them say they expect it to go to like uncompressed downloads as bandwidth gets wider. Better.
Yeah, and which would be better. Yeah. Well, and I can't wait for that to happen because the MP3s drive me nuts. But it is the standard of how things are right now. So I mean, we're dealing with the cassette tapes of MP3s are like cassette tapes to, WAV files of being better than a CD. Because a WAV file can be a higher resolution if you don't compress it down.
Yeah, it's all about convenience of the MP3.
And that's kind of what the iDiddy thing is. As far as what I'm doing the download cards is because it puts the music directly into the smartphone of how people listen to music now anyway, because people will start just carrying their music on their phones more than they're going to carry it anywhere else.
And it gives them that autographed card. So at least for those who want something physical, they have it.
It's still there, and it's a different type of thing as opposed to just a straight download. I am going to put it on iTunes, and I am going to put it on all that stuff probably end of May. Like May 22nd is when we're going to release it out in Europe, so it'll be pretty close to that date. So I think that's how I'm going to end up doing it here. Again, like you said, it is kind of a soft launch. It is kind of a different way of doing it, but the standard and the typical way of making records has changed. There's not many outlets to put the records in. There's not, it's just changed.
Yeah, outside of Amazon.
Well, I could sell it on Amazon, and I could sell it on, there's a lot of places I can sell it. But the point is where you'd have large distribution orders through, Best Buy will take, 5,000 or, Tower Records, which isn't even around anymore, will take 5,000. In other words, you'd have thousands of records that would be bought and distributed through those chains or HMV or all that stuff. It was just different because now it's like it's not typical. It's not even there.
Yeah, even Amazon will maybe take 100 to start or something like that. It's not that big a number.
No, it's not. And again, they do that through their fulfillment house. You're fulfilling that amount of stuff. But again, as that unfolds in the process of it right now, it's just kind of, I'd rather just keep it in my own understanding of where things are, as opposed to just handing it to somebody else and giving them a fee of, pretty much the whole record. When basically I've done everything on it. I might as well see it through. I did everything on the record. I might as well see it through.
Well, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Like talking to Richie Kotzen about it, and he's just has no real interest in North American labels anymore. He's got a label in Japan, and that's about it. He just puts it through CD Baby, and that's it. He does it all himself, and forget it.
Well, it's just different. And again, nobody's getting their panties in a twist here. It's just a different market. We're in a live touring market, which Slaughter still, we still play, we still go out there. We haven't been out in, your neck of the woods in a while, but we still make it over to Toronto, and we still go out there and play Regina and Calgary. I mean, there's a lot of places. It's more in the casinos and that type of stuff.
Sure.
Than just your standard thing.
And what made you decide to do this as a solo record instead of a Slaughter record when Slaughter's got the bigger brand?
Well, Slaughter has a bigger brand, but my band is really not in it. I did everything on the record. So it was kind of like, do I just label it and say it's Slaughter just to say it's Slaughter? It's not. It's
Yeah.
It's what I did. And again, that's nothing negative to the band. It's just it is different than the band. Some of the songs it's not typical. Some of the songs sound very Slaughter-esque. Some of them are outside, I think, of what that is. But all in all, I think if people like what I did, I think they'll like what I did on this thing as well.
And with the state of the music business being what it is, what made the time now right to do a solo record?
Well, what it is, Dana and Blando and Zoltan they play in Vince Neil's band. And they go out and do shows with him. And in the time that they're going and doing all that, I was just like, well, I'll just write some songs. So I didn't look at it as like, I'm going to go write a record, but it was just something that I was just doing, and it ended up being a record. So, it wasn't a course of events of like, okay, now I'm going to make a record. It was just a course of I was writing songs, and then I had something to show for it at the end of it all. So I just said, I'll just put this thing out. Again, not necessarily with a label in the States or in Canada, because, they're really, everybody's so driven off pop artists and instead of, things that are artists that have been around a long time. And I'm just putting it out there, much like Richie Kotzen, much like John Five doing his thing, just get your music out there and just be an artist. I think that's really what I think I've gathered with all this is it's just better to just be an artist and not worry about where your art goes, but make art. And whether it's wrong or right, you're an artist. And that's really what I think I was kind of holding off. Well, when I do a Slaughter record or when I do this, I'm just like, I'll just start putting music out. And if it does good, if it does bad, whatever, I'm still an artist and my music's out.
Well, you kind of dipped the toe in the water about a year ago when you released your single.
Right.
Was the response enough? Did that give you enough encouragement to keep on going, or did you already plan on continuing on with solo material?
Well, I planned on continuing on from, with that from there. It's just I didn't know where the industry was, and I was trying to figure out how it was working or put my finger on the pulse of it all. It's just a different pulse, and it's just a different thing than a typical, than what I was used to. Again, it's not that it's wrong or right. It's just very different. So I think I just wanted to get the music out and and just and not worry about it. Just, like I said, just be an artist, get the music out. Whatever happens with it is what happens with it.
And can you tell me about working with Michael Wagener? Had you worked with him before?
I did a Randy Rhoads tribute years ago with Michael. George Lynch played guitar on it, and he said, "Hey man, I got a couple songs for you to sing if you're open to it." And I'm like, "Okay." So I went up there and we worked together. So we got to know each other a little bit more than normal, because I produced and Slaughter's a band that we wrote and produced our own music and still play it today, which is the only band of our genre that did that. And so I really didn't work with Michael before till that. And we stayed in touch. And then when I finished this record up and I got to the single, I was like, you know what? Let me call Michael. So I called him up and said, "Hey Michael, I got this record that I'm kind of sitting on. I'm about to mix it. Would you be interested in mixing this thing?" And he said, "Sure." I was sitting, let me hear a track. So I gave him the track. He mixed it, and he said, "Man, I just love this record. I just love it. I'd love to mix the record." So that's kind of how it happened. And I must say that in that side of it, I really value not only his expertise but his friendship. He's a really, really good man all the way across the board, and so talented with 100 million records under his belt. So he knows what he's doing.
Oh yeah. And is there anything special that he brought to the mix?
I think that he made some of the mixes more aggressive than what I would have, because he'll turn the guitar up more than I would. But that's typical from Michael Wagener. I mean, he's a guitar guy. He knows guitar tones, and he's not afraid of that. To me, I always, I'd have a little bit different, a different mix. Again, not to say who's wrong or right, but I think he did a great job with it, and I think he added it sounds like an old classic rock record. That's what I really wanted with this, is to have something that was like retro, very classic rock. At some point I'm going to put out vinyl.
Oh, great.
And so I just want to have something that's very old school. Because that's, again, let the record play as it plays and not really get in the way of letting it play. It's like when you put on an old Zeppelin record or something, you just put it on, and, there are some songs that are more aggressive or more party-like or whatever, but the record as a whole still plays as a solid body. And that's, I think he really helped connect that in his mixes.
And I would assume the fact that you played everything outside of drums, just to have a little bit of an outside perspective on the material, probably helped.
I think and I think that, another part of it is art's never finished, it's just abandoned. And
I hear ya. Oh yeah.
And I think that letting that just be done and letting go of that was probably healthy for me, because now I can just move on and do the next round of whatever the round is going to be. And he was great to add that extra rock attitude to it. That, again, that's part of his mixing and what he does.
Yeah, if you're going to hire Michael Wagener, they all come with a style.
Well, he does. He comes with a style. He has if you listen to the Skid Row records, or you listen to, things that he does, it sounds, everything's got good body to it, but he definitely has an edge to it. And that's what I think, again, that he really brought to the record that wasn't there prior.
And do you have any plans on touring it?
I really don't. If something came up on that side of it, I'd be open to it. But for the most part, I'm really focused on the Slaughter stuff. Kind of like, it'd be no different than what Paul Stanley did when he's done the records away from Kiss. I mean, he might do, 5 or 10 shows at the most, but, he's in Kiss. It's not even the same thing as, Slaughter's different than what I'm doing on my own. But at the same time, he's still an artist. And I think that's the key, is to keep making music as an artist and not really worry about where it's going or how much it's going to sell or who cares and who doesn't. And, it's just make the art.
And of course, because you've had a pretty lengthy career, you do come with a built-in audience. So there are people that are going to hunt it out and find it.
I think so, but I think even more so is that music is a soundtrack to all of our lives, and I've said this in many interviews. But it's like, no different than a Kiss record. It becomes kind of the background of the environment of where you were at that time and what was happening in your life at that time, and Fly the Angels Up All Night became a part of people's soundtrack, and I'm hoping that this music, as we get into spring here and it starts to kick in, that it's a good time for this music to be a part of their life, And again, that's what you hope with your music, is that it becomes a part of people's lives, because that's what your art's supposed to be.
One other thing I want to ask you about was a voiceover career. Is that something you're still actively doing?
I just did I just sang a theme song for some cartoon for Disney, and I don't know when it's on or what's going on with it. I mean, they just have all these different things that they'll bring every once in a while, but I don't do as much of it as I'd like to. I was doing some character stuff, kind of mid-90s, but I moved out to Tennessee out here, and when you're far away from the directors and stuff, they really want you in their face when they're directing, and they want you there now, and they want you to have lunch with them first. And there's a social aspect that goes along with all this stuff that is just not happening otherwise. So it's not like I'm not doing it, it's just that I'm not doing as much as I'd like to.
In terms of doing that and doing character work, what kind of beast is that? That sounds like a totally different experience.
It's totally different. It's totally different. And the side that is different is that, when you're doing a character thing, it's beyond yourself. It's beyond yourself. And, I auditioned for Donald Duck for Disney, and I was almost Donald Duck for Disney, which had been a great gig. But it's just different. I mean, it's a lot of fun to do, but it's very different in the aspect of you're sitting in front of a microphone and a music stand with the script, and it's not like you have the control like I have of doing what I'm doing at all.
How did you get into that in the first place?
I like doing it. I met a dear friend of mine named Jess Harnell, and we started hanging out. He introduced me to some people, and then I kind of fell into it from that. Jess has a band called, I think it was Rock Candy is the name of the band. Rock Candy or Rock Sugar, I can't remember which the name of it is.
You have your record coming out probably wider in May. What else is on the horizon for you?
Well, I have a whole year of slaughter dates. I'll get this music out, and in the meantime, I'll continue to write more music, whether it winds up on my next solo thing or on the next Slaughter record. I'm just going to keep writing and keep making music and get it out there.
Never giving up.
That was Mark Slaughter. I hope you enjoyed it. As we said in the interview, Mark's new solo CD, Reflections in a Rearview Mirror, is currently available digitally at markslaughter.com, and it's available for pre-order on CD. It will also be released in Europe shortly on Escape Music. Well, that's it for another week on The Double Stop. You can find all 50 or so past episodes on iTunes and SoundCloud. Links to those accounts are up at thedoublestop.com. You can also keep track of the show on Twitter at The Double Stop and on Facebook at facebook.com/thedoublestop. As always, lots of cool stuff coming up on The Double Stop. I'll see you next week with a brand new interview.